Welcome to another video brought to you by Algin and Enterprise Hobby. I'm Gail and I have in front of me the TREX 150X. And what we're going to do in this video is show you how to bind to a Spektrum radio. I'm using the DX9. We'll set up a helicopter from scratch and we'll go ahead and attach the satellite, and then at the end of the video I'll show you where I put the satellite. Let's get started. First thing, make sure that you have the latest firmware for your transmitter, whether you're using a DX9, DX18, a DX8, 7, 6. You need to make sure that you have the latest firmware. They're free for download. You can visit the Spektrum website and log into your account and download that, because that's important. I'm going to go ahead and hold down the wheel, turn on the radio so we're in the setup so we can select a new model. I'm going to go add new model. And I'm going to go ahead and select helicopter. This will rewrite the data. I'm not going to go ahead and put a new model name in. We'll just leave it heli. I haven't touched anything else. So everything else is just default, and I'll show you at the end some of the settings that I change. So I'm going to go ahead and boot. And you can see I have a Model 26 heli, and it's normal. I haven't changed anything else. Now, I'm going to go ahead and turn this off because we have our model. I'm going to go ahead and plug in a battery because we're going to go ahead and do the binding process. That's the first step. And when I put the battery into the battery tray, I just barely slide it into place. I'm not going to snap it all the way in the battery. I'm just going to push it forward gently. That makes a good enough connection that you can go through the setup. That way, if there is a problem and something happens, basically just bumping the battery turns around and disengages it and shuts the helicopter off. The first thing that you want to do is you want to check the version of firmware that the helicopter came with. And you want to load the Algin 150 GSR app. In the top left hand corner it says 150 GRS app 1.1.1. As of the filming, this is the current app. And we're going to go ahead and check out what firmware is on the helicopter itself. I'm going to just go ahead and gently press the battery forward, not snapping it. Now we're going to go ahead and connect. I'm going to push search device Bluetooth. And as you can see, it comes up with TREX 150. In the top right hand corner, it should start spinning as it is now. Looking for the device. We now have connected. And you can see in the top left-hand corner that firmware version for the helicopter is 150 GSR firmware version 1.0.2. I know that there's an updated version of that firmware. So the current version, as of the making of this video, is version 1.1.1. First thing that we're going to do is update the firmware. We're connected. I'm going to click down here at the bottom. It says 150 GSR settings. And as you can see, there's your menu options. There's multiple ways of going through this. You can use the arrows at the bottom of the screen to scroll left and right. You can select the menu, or as I'm going to do, I just scrolled down a little and select firmware update. Takes me to the firmware update page. In the top left hand corner, under step 1, you can use the drop down menu and see the different versions of firmware. As I stated, version 1.1.1 is the current version. I'm going to go ahead and select that. Now I have to hit firmware download. App will let me know once it's completed. You have to make sure that you're connected to the internet, whatever device you're using, whether it's an Android device or whether it's an iPhone device or an Apple device. Download is completed. Hit OK. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit firmware update. And sometimes this takes a while. The preparing can stay there for a while. and then it'll start counting. Just be patient, let it find itself, let it write. The key to this is at the end of every cycle that you're doing something, if you're going to disconnect the app, to make sure you let the helicopter, the 150 GSR board and helicopter sit, because it's got to complete the writing process. All too often what happens is, as soon as the person disconnects the app, which I'll demonstrate, from the helicopter, they immediately remove the battery or start moving it. And they're moving it while there is an update finishing the process. We're at 67%. Now, you can see it automatically disconnected, and it went through its sequence. Now we're receiving the red aqua bind fail. I'm going to go ahead and press the battery back, and now install the satellite. This is just a DMS-X. You can use DMS-X or DMS-2 or the JR satellite. I'm going to go ahead and plug the little extension in. I'm not going to mount the satellite, that way you can see on camera the actual light while we do the binding process. There's a couple things to be aware of, is that number one, I've already created a model in the DX9. It's a standard helicopter model. I've not adjusted or changed any of the settings yet. Not necessary to do that because the settings are controlled by the GSR 150 app. In order to bind the model, I have to go into the app and go ahead and select DMS-X satellite. So I'm going to gently slide the battery in. It's not snapping in place, just in case I have a problem, it'll just pop off. As you can see, we're loading up the GSR app. I'm using a Android tablet. So we have the red aqua light, which means it's not bound, which is fine. The satellite light is not on. So we're going to go ahead and search for device. Select 150. It's connected. You can see up in the upper left-hand corner, the firmware that's on the helicopter is 1.1.1. Go to the bottom part of the screen and select 150 GSR settings. We're going to go into transmitter. I'm going to go ahead and punch transmitter. You can see aileron, elevator, throttle, rudder, pitch, and the flight mode, which is attitude mode or 3D, and stick calibration. So they usually come default to FTABA S-FHSS built in. So I'm going to use a drop-down box, and I'm going to select Spektrum, Satellite, DSMX. Now I'm going to go ahead and select the home in the top left-hand corner, the little house. It's going to take me back, and I'm going to go ahead and hit disconnect. I'm going to slide the battery back. Now, in order to bind, you're going to want to depress the button in this location to turn around and put it in binding mode. So I'm using a little plastic screwdriver from the Beast Plus. After I depress the button and hold the button, then I'm going to slide the battery up. And as you can see, I have the binding light. The Spektrum has to be several feet away. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up the transmitter. And when I do so, I'm going to go ahead and hold down the bind button and walk a couple feet away. And then I'll turn the power on, which will allow the unit to bind.
Binding. DSMX 22 milliseconds. Bind complete.
You can see that I have a blue light. However, on occasion, after you bind, you may not receive the blue light. You may receive the bind failed, which is the red aqua flashing back and forth. But you usually see that your Spektrum satellite has a solid color. So to simulate that, to show you what I'm talking about, I'm going to go ahead and make some changes, and then I'll let you know what I did afterwards. The transmitter's on, the DX9. I'm going to go ahead and plug in the battery. You may receive this when you're doing your first setup and bind, and you'll see how the helicopter reacts. So it goes to boot, goes to blue, then it gives me the red aqua. However, I do have a solid satellite. The sticks are not going to move anything. So you're not going to see any activity on the helicopter itself because it's bound, but it's not seeing zero throttle as of yet. But what we're going to do is go ahead and go into the app itself, take care of calibrating the sticks. That can solve the problem. It can also solve the problem when you calibrate the throttle, or you might have to use sub-trim to move your throttle down slightly because it's not seeing zero throttle. That's the issue, is right now it's not seeing zero throttle. So it's one of those things that may have to happen, but do not touch the sub-trim until you've actually done the stick calibration and then the throttle calibration. We're going to do those two procedures next. So we've connected the 150X to the GSR app. We're going to go ahead and select 150 GR settings. We're going to select transmitter. And remember, we had the red aqua light display. If you move the stick left or right, there was no movement on the helicopter. That's because it is not seeing zero throttle. So we've gone ahead and gone into the app. And you can see on the app itself that when I move the stick, the aileron goes to minus 100, plus 100. So that's backwards. When you move the stick to the right, it should go to the 100 direction. It doesn't have to be 100, but you're going to go ahead and hit reverse. So now as we move the stick to 3 o'clock and at 9 o'clock, it moves in the proper direction. The elevator, when you pull back, should go negative, and this should go positive. It's not, so I'm going to go ahead and check the reverse button. Now when I pull back on the stick, it goes negative, moves positive. Rudder to the left, it's going the wrong way. Should be negative, but it's going positive, so we're going to hit reverse. Now we got negative, positive. Now throttle and pitch should both be at 0, which they are, or minus. And as you raise them, they go towards the 100 side. So that's correct. Now we're going to talk about the flight mode. The flight mode itself is tied to channel 5, which is a gyro gain. And sometimes the Spektrum radio, depending on which one you have, ties it to this switch in this location. So if I flip mine to the middle and pull it down, you can see it changes to attitude mode, and push all the way forward is 3D mode. So mine's already set up. However, if that's not the case, or you don't want it on that switch, you can change the switch if you want, if you're going to use the attitude mode as a rescue bailout. I fly in 3D and do not really use the bailout feature. It just depends on what switch you would like to assign it to. If that's not working out of the box, as far as just selecting your helicopter, then what you need to do is enable your gyro gain, and the positive 50 is going to activate one direction and the negative 50 is going to activate the other direction. And you can use that to adjust which way you want 3D. I want it 3D with the stick all the way forward. And if I pull the stick all the way back, or the switch all the way back, then I'm going to be in attitude mode. Okay, now that we have that, everything is moving in the right direction, I like to go ahead and hit the house and hit disconnect. I'm going to wait until the unit initializes itself. This time I'm getting a blue light, and you can hear just a little bit of the motors almost trying to turn over I get a little tone out of it. That's because it's not quite seeing, it's 0, but not, there's a little bit of throttle play. We're going to go back into the app, and this is where we're going to configure our stick movement. So I select TREX, connected. I hit the 150, hit transmitter, and I see that the reverse is still there with aileron. I'm going to check elevator, rudder still reversed, so everything is where it should be. And I'm just doing a double check. Now we're going to do the stick travel calibration. So I'm going to select that at the bottom. And if you don't see it because you're using your phone, then you have to scroll down because the phone screen's smaller. And I'm going to select start calibration. The trick is don't swirl the sticks, because what you want to do is go 9 to 3 and 12 to 6. And if you move them slowly, you will actually see the first time that you do this, that when you move the aileron, the elevator actually increases and decreases sometimes. 100% aileron to the right, and I have interaction with elevator. And I move to the left, and I have interaction with elevator. And I'm staying in that channel, 9 to 3, 9 to 3. If you stir them, you're going to have crossover. It's just not the best way. So I do 9 to 3 a couple times. Then I'm going to go 12 to 6 for the elevator. And I move back and forth 3-4 times at least. I'm going to move over to the rudder. And 12 to 6. Now I go back and do it one more time. I go 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and I watch. 12 o'clock, 6, 12, 6. Rudder. 9, 3, 9, 3. Throttle and pitch. 12, 6, 12, 6. Complete the calibration. So I'm going to hit complete. I go ahead and hit the house because I'm going to go ahead and exit out. I hit confirm disconnect. Let the helicopter sit, get the tone. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and remove the battery and double check to make sure that my stick calibration as far as left and right stays in the helicopter, just to be safe, because the next step that we're going to do is we're going to do the throttle calibration. So I'm going to remove the battery, and every time I remove the battery, I gently press it back. I'm going to go ahead and reboot the Spektrum transmitter. So if I remove the battery, then I reboot the transmitter. Let the transmitter boot up. Slide the battery. Let the helicopter boot. Okay, I got a blue light. If I received a red aqua, would not panic at this point. No big deal. You will not have any aileron elevator movement, which is fine because we're going to do the throttle calibration and let the ESC read the high and low throttle on the transmitter. Go ahead and select search devices, 150. Wait for it to connect. I receive the connected signal with the green light and connect at the top. Hit the 150 GRS settings. Now I'm going to go to ESC. It says, although the 150 throttle calibration has been completed at the factory, it is recommended to perform a calibration after binding to ensure smooth motor operation. It's a must. I'm going to go ahead and hit calibration. Now it says the Bluetooth will disconnect after you press OK. Please reboot to do the throttle calibration. So as soon as I press OK, the helicopter is going to disconnect itself. I'm going to remove the battery. I'm going to reboot the transmitter. Then I'm going to plug in the battery. and I should hear a musical tone notes. If I don't, that's okay. I'm going to unplug the battery again and go through the process till I receive that. And select OK. Let the helicopter disconnect. It's officially disconnected now. Remove the batteries, just slide it back a little bit. I'm going to turn off the transmitter. Turn on the transmitter. Now I'm going to slide the battery, just touch it so that it The 150 has calibrated the throttle by playing that musical song. It's reinitialized itself. And I have a blue light, which means it says C0 throttle. If I still didn't see zero throttle at this point, meaning I have the red aqua light, which can happen occasionally with a transmitter, then at this point is where I would use the sub trim and adjust it down. And you can use just the sub trim tab on the transmitter, adjust it down until you see the helicopter initialize. At that point, then you have to make a decision of, do I leave a little bit of sub trim in so that it reads zero throttle? Do I go back through the calibration, which may be necessary? When you receive red aqua, it's not going to initialize just like a big helicopter. The only difference is the servos on this helicopter are not going to work until the ESC reads zero throttle, but they will work in the app. And now we're going to check the rest of the settings in the app because I just want to be able to get you into the air. So I'm going to go ahead and hit search Bluetooth devices, select 150. It's going to look. I'm going to select 150 GSR settings. I go to collective pitch. So we're going to go click on the first one. I'm going to use the right bottom arrow, go over to swash plate. Looking at the swash plate parameters, the app screen is actually backwards because the helicopter is pointing the opposite direction. But this is servo 1, servo 2, and servo 3. If you need to make any adjustments to the servos because you do not feel that the arms are parallel, or if you put a swash leveler on and you need to make some adjustments, then my suggestion is you go to the next screen, which is collective pitch, and you go ahead and hit zero pitch. And if you have a number in here, then go ahead and put the number to 0. Well, I'm going to do that. I got 11. Now, I have zero pitch. I'm going to go back one screen, and I'm going to look at servo 1, 2, and 3 and see if I need to make any adjustments. If I need to make any adjustments because I have a swash lever on, which will be in a different video, or you feel visually that you need to adjust one of the servos, then go ahead and make the adjustment now with zero pitch from the next screen. So I don't need to. So I'm not going to make any adjustments. I'm going to scroll back over, and I know that I was 11. I'm going to go ahead and fold the blades. Make sure I'm okay. And I am. And do not click on the next screen until you extend the blades. Because if you go into the pitch screen, collective pitch, to check it, then the blades, if they're folded, may cause the servos to jitter up and down rapidly, which could damage the servos. In this location, all I want to do as a collective pitch is make sure that the negative is set at 80. You can make adjustments to this if you want less pitch. I like 80. Most of us that are flying prefer 80. And if you move it positive, then you'll see it switches to the positive collective pitch, and that says 80. You want them to be the same. Now, I've gone to parameters menu. There's 3 flying default styles that you can select for parameters: beginner, experienced, or expert. Beginner is going to be very sluggish, not going to be able to flip the helicopter over. Experienced is sluggish, not very reactive or responsive, and take a while for the helicopter to actually roll or flip. You better have some height if you use that feature. My suggestion, if you can hover and you can fly left and right a little bit, or maybe in a circle, or do any kind of maneuvers, you want the helicopter to fly like the helicopters are used to. And I would select expert for that reason and hit OK. You can tune some of the items out by using Expo and experiment with the settings. But as soon as you select expert, it's going to fly like a big helicopter. It's going to fly like one if you can flip or do forward flight. Even if you're not flipping, you're still going to have that full collective, positive and negative, and you'll be okay. We've already done the ESC calibration. So we're in the accelerometer menu. Right now, not really anything to do in this screen. You can use this screen to adjust if flying in attitude mode. If the helicopter is drifting, you're going to be able to use the accelerometer subtrim to adjust left and right drift or back and forward drift. So if the helicopter is drifting a little bit to the right, then you might want to apply a little left and allow for it to compensate. Step 2 is if the helicopter is drifting a little bit in just a hover, then you can see that it's already set up for a +5. I would leave that alone until you actually hover the helicopter. It's going to drift a little bit. You're going to have to do a little correction, but this is where you would make fine-tune adjustments for the attitude mode or just the standard drift. So I'd leave the settings exactly the way they are at this point. Then we have the last screen, which is firmware. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to menu. As you can see, we've used everything on this screen. We've discussed from transmitter mode, the swash plate, the collective, the parameters, the ESC, the accelerometer, and the firmware update. You should be basically ready to go ahead and fly at this point, other than we need to attach the Spektrum satellite. I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this, hit the home button, hit confirm disconnect, and I'm going to make sure that I allow the helicopter time to reboot itself, write all the updates. Okay, now the helicopter's done that, the 150. So I'm going to go ahead and pop the battery off. Now the question is what to do with this satellite. I prefer to mount it directly underneath in this location. Except I take it out of the case. There's 2 little hex screws, and I believe they're the same size as the 150. It's tool, blue tool. You just have to be careful when you pull the board off because there's a little piece of tape. once you pull off the case, I was just careful because there's not really anything on the back. You just don't want to scrape it. You just got to get the tape off of it. Then I put a little piece of tape on the back side, double-sided, and attach it right in this location. With just a little double-sided tape. With the actual battery and landing skids back on. Fits a little easier, in my opinion. Yes, I've voided the warranty. Haven't had any of them break in 3 years while I've been doing, mounting them that fashion. And it's a little bit easier. Now with the new canopy, the satellite fits, but as you can see, it makes it really nice and just super easy for the satellite to fit right underneath. It's basically ready to go fly. I want to show you a couple other things in the transmitter because people ask this question. What I actually do, there's no battery. We're just going to go into the transmitter, and I'm going to go down, select System Setup. I already have the model selected, which is the heli. I didn't change swash plate type. It's normal. F mode setup. This is your flight mode. It's tied to this switch in the left-hand corner. Now, throttle hold. There's no throttle hold enabled. I'm going to scroll down and go to hold switch. I'm going to click with the wheel. And I'm going to put throttle hold on this back switch in this location because it's a 2-position switch. So there's my hold. It changes it to switch H. Push the wheel to make the box solid. Go back to list. Spoken flight mode, you can do whatever you want there. Channel assignment. You can see channel 5 is gear. Now trim setup. I already know that the helicopter is going to initialize on throttle, and you don't want to really use sub trim, and I don't like to bump them. I always just have a habit with all the helicopters to put them to 0 because now they're inactive. So even if somebody comes up and tries to play with the switches, nothing's going to happen. Model utilities, warnings, telemetry, pre-flight setup, frame rate. You can change this to 11 milliseconds and bind with 11 milliseconds. I probably will do that. There's nothing else that I changed in that screen. Now people want to know what I do for just the helicopter itself. Under servo setup, you do not touch anything in this menu because everything's done in the app. However, if you do have a problem with the throttle, you may have to use a couple little clicks or of sub trim for the throttle to get it to initialize. But generally you don't. Dual rates and expo. This is a personal choice. I'm going to go into dual rates and expo, and at aileron. So I'm not going to put it on a switch. I'm going to put it on flight mode. That way I can control how much expo I have with each flight mode. I'm at 0 in normal mode right now with the aileron. I'm going to put 25. I'm going to go ahead and flip up to 1. Put 25. and I'm going to put 25 in stunt 2. When I flip hold
mode.
I'm going to put in 25. Now why am I putting in 25? Because that's what I start with. It's a personal choice. I probably will end up around 15 to 20, but I change it based on which flight mode. So then I'm going to go up, select the next one, which is elevator, go down, put it on flight mode. Elevator and aileron need to be the same, or should be. So we got hold, flip out.
2. Stunt 1. Normal mode.
We check it.
Hold mode.
25,
Normal mode.
25,
Stunt 1.
25.
Stunt
Everything's
2.
25.
Normal mode.
Now we're going to scroll up to elevator and change it to rudder. Put in the hold.
Mode.
15. If your rudder's too fast, put a little bit more in.
Normal mode. Stunt 1. Stunt 2.
That covers expo. Throttle cut, do not use, because you're using throttle hold. Throttle cut is for a gas motor that if you have to turn the motor off, then that's going to allow you to push a button and turn the gas motor off. Use it all the time on nitro helicopters. Throttle curve, you can see that I have a normal curve. Actually, it's the throttle curve. You can see that I have a normal, a 1, a 2, and a hold. Hold is 0. For 2, I'm going to go ahead and increase 2 to 100%. For 1, I'm going to follow the book, which is 90 for the first point. The manual shows 90, 85, 80, 85, 90. There's my normal 1. For normal mode, this is different than what the instruction manual has, but I just do this. I'm going to go to normal, and I'm going to change the second point to 70, third point 70, and fifth point 70. Now let me explain why I do that. The reason is because no matter what, as soon as I'm taking the helicopter off, as soon as I come up to this point and I'm flying and I'm hovering about, you're going to hover just above mid-stick, your throttle is now going to go from $70, right, to 80 and idle up 1, or stunt mode 1. When you go to stunt mode 2, it's going to go to 100%. So if you're just going to fly around and you're concerned and you want to be able to land, then go ahead and leave it at 70%. You'll have consistent head speed, and you can make those adjustments until you're comfortable with the 80. But this is how I set mine up. And then the next thing that I do is I go to pitch curve, and you can see you have 3, actually 4. They're all linear. And the only thing that I change is in normal mode, I'm going to go pitch to 40. because I don't need a lot of negative pitch to come off the ground. 40, and the second point I'm going to go to 42. How do I come up with those numbers? That's what I've always done. So again, here you're hovering, which is just above mid-stick. You're hovering probably right in that location. You can see the little line, the little mark right here where the stick is. As soon as I flip to idle up 1, the pitch doesn't change. So the helicopter isn't going to crash into the ground, and it's not going to raise. And if I go to idle up 2, it's not going to change the pitch. All that's going to change is the motor is going to increase. It might go up a little bit, but it's certainly not going to go down. So as long as you have these pitch curves where you hover equal, then when you make a change, you're not going to have the helicopter go on the ground. So if you follow the manual on the pitch curve, what ends up happening is when you flip from a hover standpoint, the helicopter is actually going to be going down. So that's why I'd recommend the pitch curve that I put in here and recommend the throttle curve flat line on 70. The gyro itself, that is inhibited because you can see that my switch here, if you look at gear, is activated and it's changing 100 and minus 100. So minus is going to put me into attitude mode, and full forward plus 100 is going to put me into 3D mode. If your switch is not working or you don't have it assigned to it, then you can enable the gyro, and you just have to set it up for on a switch. You pick whichever switch you want, and then if you want to pick it here, then you can just set it for negative, positive numbers, and you will be able to have the light switch. And you can indicate that by, if it's an aqua color, you're in attitude mode. If it's a blue color, after you plug in the battery, then you're in 3D mode. Governor is not going to do anything. Tail curve, nothing. Mixing, nothing. Sequence, range test, timer. I'm going to put a countdown timer. 2 minutes, 30 seconds. Throttle out, 25%. Telemetry, nothing. Voice setup, no. Monitor. And you can see here, monitor, if you look at your servos, you can, this is where you can find your switch working, because you want to make sure that that gear works. So nothing there. So we're going to come back, and you'll see I have a two-minute timer. As soon as I start flying, the timer starts working. When it's done, it'll either vibrate, or you can set it for vibrate or voice, or a combination of both. So that's a quick run through of what I set up in the transmitter. This completes a quick setup using a DX9 radio from Spektrum and the Algin TREX 150X. I appreciate you taking the time to watch the video. You're welcome to send any suggestions to help improve the videos, or if I missed something, because that does happen on occasion. So I appreciate people pointing those things out so that I can either make adjustments or changes or add things to help people set up their helicopters a little easier. As always,